From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
Quick question I'd like to ask. How many of you have been on a cruise? Okay, some of you may not have. There was a little study done actually some years back by Royal Caribbean staff and crew members where they compared notes about what people who were having a first cruise, usually they were kind of finding out what it was all about, and they asked some peculiar questions while being on a cruise. And so here are the 10 questions that you may wonder about a person asking this kind of question. But anyway, they're on the cruise, and they asked the crew, does the crew sleep on board? Another question that was asked from time to time, what time is the midnight buffet? And then another one, which elevator takes me to the front of the ship? Do you generate your own electricity? Is that island totally surrounded by water? Is the water in the toilet salt or fresh? Who cares? What language do they speak in Alaska? Oh, and what do you do with the ice carvings after they melt? How high above sea level are we? And when they're searching those walls to get pictures, they asked, how do we know which pictures are ours? So there you have it. I don't know where to go with that, but anyway, my talk today is on balance, becoming spiritually balanced. And I think a key to being happy and productive and fulfilling in this life really requires that we be balanced and understand what that means. When we're out of balance, obviously, it leads to an element of feeling in some form of disharmony and some kind of struggle and conflict and some degree of suffering. When we're in suffering, we're out of balance in some way, really. Life is a process, I believe, of learning to be in balance and maintain a sense of spiritual balance. And by balance, I mean being in balance with the outer world and the inner world together. And in being in a physical, material world while also being connected to the spiritual world. It means balancing being human and having a human experience and the fact that we are actually spiritual beings and want to be in alignment with our true spiritual nature. Of course, it's been said we are spiritual beings having a human experience, but it's always remembering that we are a spiritual being, and that's a part of being and maintaining balance, the coming of them together. It's easy to lose sight of or a sense of connection with our spiritual nature and the spiritual dimension that lives within us because there is so much that is happening and so much is moving and so much demanded of us and so many changes and it's a fast-moving kind of life and it's easy to lose focus. And so we are always in this process of kind of learning to balance this tightrope, if you will, or the balance beam, or however you wish to think of it, that we may be dealing with. And it's that rope that has been stretched from birth to death. And through it all, we're intended to learn balance and keep some form of balance as to who we are, what we are, and how we are showing up in this world. And sometimes the rope or the balance beam or whatever seems pretty wide. It seems like we're going along in the flow. Everything is easy. It's as wide as a sidewalk, harmony, peace, and what have you. And then there are other times in which we are dealing with circumstances and situations that are thrown at us, or even our loved ones or people we know or friends, that throws us out of balance. And we get to be sort of on edge and shaky and can fall off. When we disconnect from our spiritual nature, I think you would all agree, when we disconnect from the source, from the divine, from our spiritual principles, those are the times when we really are most likely and vulnerable to taking a tumble and taking a fall and having some degree of suffering. It was Albert Einstein that said, really coined it, that life is like riding a bicycle, and to keep your balance, you have to keep moving. And the point that he makes there is that movement or progress is very important, and it's tied into keeping your balance. That if you are moving and progressing as a spiritual being, that means you're growing in understanding the spiritual principles, their application, and that will keep you in a form of balance. He's saying that balance is movement, movement is balance. And so in this life, we are constantly dealing with various polarities, and part of being human means experiencing the good and the bad, the ups, the downs, the highs, the lows. There will be the potential for every person to potentially experience joy and sorrow, success and failure, harmony and conflict, health and illness, abundance and lack, winning and losing, love and hate, oneness and separation, light and darkness. You can go on and on, right? There are many forms of that. So there will be suffering. There is suffering. Everyone has some degree of suffering in life. They do. And oftentimes that suffering sends us really as an impetus toward reaching for what is spiritual truths that can strengthen us, that can move us through, that can steady us once again, balance our way through the circumstances that we may be facing. And so it's important oftentimes that realize that we are so quick to abandon ourselves, to abandon our higher selves, to abandon spiritual principles. They don't have a depth sometimes in us. And the key to keeping your balance is to know when you've lost it. That there's an element of awareness that says, man, I'm feeling out of balance. I'm feeling really in disharmony. I'm really kind of tied in knots. I'm angry. I'm stressful. I'm whatever it might be that you know is off. And so when you take a tumble into fear or despair or depression of some sort, or pessimism or negativity, it's a time to simply pull back and notice and just question yourself. Get honest with yourself. What's happening here? What's the root of this? Where have I moved away from? What is it I can embrace that will steady me and balance me in terms of the energies that are coming forth for me, no matter what the circumstances? So there are questions to ask. There is a fellow who has an answering machine, I learned, and on his recording, when you call him, what it says is, quote, "Hello." This is not an answering machine. This is a questioning machine. The questions are, who are you? And what do you want? If you think these are trivial questions, consider that most people go through their entire lives without finding the answer to either one. Beep. So, I love that. So you can't get away from the question, who are you and what do you want? And my answer to who am I is that I'm a spiritual being. I'm a child of God. And what do I want? What I want for myself is to reflect the divine that I've been called to be and be part of, to reflect that peace and love and joy that is my true nature. And so that's the goal, and we're all working on that. And so, as we said, a key to keeping your balance is knowing when you've lost it. And so for me, spiritual balance means being centered. And that means almost having like a physical stand that nothing that comes at you can knock me down, knock me off of the stance that I have taken. The stance is one of truth, if you will. That's the goal. And so it's a feeling that moves through you, that a sense of connectedness and attuned vibrationally to truth and these ideas. Now, that's something that is always the goal. And I don't always get there, but I try to notice when I've lost a sense of balance. And we go back to questioning. Our inner and our outer will reflect each other, okay? And Jesus said, a man's foes will be those of his own household. His metaphor for household was your own consciousness, your own inner world. A man's foes shall be those of his own household. And he also said that every kingdom divided against itself is brought down, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. To not stand means you've lost your balance. You're going to fall. Okay? He said also the kingdom of heaven is within you. So if we are divided against the kingdom, as he says in that statement, then you are divided against yourself. You are divided against the higher self, the kingdom that resides in you, that wants to be expressed and felt and lived. Jesus said there would be things in this world that you will face that would possibly throw you off balance. The way that he said that is, in the world you will have tribulation. We have tribulation. He went on to say, in the world you will have, or he said, I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that persecute you. Which means that you have the potential, as you go through this life, of having things come at you like being cursed, being hated, being persecuted, and other things that don't feel very good. Are you going to be able to maintain a sense of balance? There is a way to react and respond to these things that are of your higher nature. But we will maintain balance if we integrate and live spiritual teachings. And it's how deep we allow these teachings to go within us. And of course, Jesus taught the lesson of the different levels in which we accept and receive in these teachings. And it was a very simple parable that he taught. And he told the disciples, you know, it's the parable of the sower. And he made it clear by simply saying seeds were sown by the sower, and they fell by the wayside, and they fell on stony ground, and they fell among thorns, and they fell upon good ground. And the disciples said, duh. So Jesus said, well, I'll explain. And so he went, and you know, if you read it in the scriptures, the passage, then he interprets his own parable for them. And he said the seeds are the word, it is the word of God. It is teaching, spiritual truth, seeds. Okay, and some fall just by the wayside. They just get blown away. They don't have a chance. And then some are sown on rocky ground, and that's those individuals who hear it and it's joyful and, oh, wow, this is great. But he says they have no root. And when trouble or persecution arises, they fall away. Those are his words. And others are those who, it's sown among thorns. And those are the people or individuals who hear the word, but he says the cares of the world, the lure of wealth, the desires for other things, they come and choke off the word, choke off those teachings, and yield one nothing. And then there are the ones that are and symbolize good soil, and they hear the word, they accept it, they embrace it, and they bear fruit 100-fold. So those are the different levels that he's talking about. And so when we are in stress, anxiety, fear, worry, we can be out of balance. We can cause ourselves some degree of suffering. And when we're in fear, our mind often will make up a story. Fear does that. It'll make up a story about something that's not very pleasant, of an outcome that yet has not happened. It's not here now, but it's something that's developing in your life, something you're heading toward, a project, or this or that, and the mind often will throw at you images that fabricate an outcome that is typically not true or accurate or good. Let me give you an example of one that had hold of me and threw me off balance. I was 21 years old, had my annual visit at the dentist in my hometown in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin. It's our lifetime dentist. And so he checked out my teeth, and everything had always been pretty good. And he said, well, there's one tooth here. We need to do a procedure. I said, oh, what's the procedure? It was on the lower bottom left molar, furthest back tooth. He said, we need to do a root canal. I said, I've never heard of a root canal. I don't know what a root canal is. I don't know anyone who's ever had a root canal. It's a horrible sounding thing. This is all going on in my mind. I had images and projections of what was going to happen to me if I let him do a root canal. So in my mind, I said, no one's going to build a canal in my mouth. I will have him pull that tooth, okay? I will not allow a canal. He was horrified at the thought of pulling the tooth. He tried to explain. I had no listening. I was locked on to what and how horrible a root canal could be. And so finally, he caved in and began to pull that tooth, as mortified as he was. And this was not his forte, and the tooth broke into several pieces and it had parts that he couldn't get at. So I had to be in suffering, which I brought on myself because of my ignorance, my not understanding, my fear, my being out of balance. And so I had to sleep a night until I got an appointment with a dental surgeon who dug the rest out the next day. Years later, because that upper tooth had nothing to bite on, began to drop with gravity. So I had to have a saddle tooth built, the one next to the one on the lower. I had to have that. That worked for a few years, and then I needed to have an implant. So they had to drill into my bone, as they do for implants. Never had that done. So here's what I did to myself. Look what fear did. I am embarrassed to tell you, but there isn't anything before I leave you that you won't know about me. It's amazing what we do to ourselves. Anyway, the mind is often afraid of what it doesn't understand. You know, it's hard to take people forward even in spiritual ideas and thoughts because they get locked into being conservative. This is the way it is because they're afraid of anything that they haven't really heard about before or what have you. It can be many things. It can be any area. But notice that the mind tends to do this. And notice where it is that you may have created a story that you locked onto and it kept you somehow from your good, or it led to some form of suffering. It's a hard lesson that we learn. It was a hard lesson that I had to learn. I think of it often. I've had root canals since, okay? So I'm okay. But there's a tribe in Africa that had a very effective technique. From an early age, they would teach their children that to be mindful, meaning present in the moment, knowing their thoughts and their thinking, is to be mindful. And if a person then as a child and as they grew into adulthood would have some foreboding thought, as an African tribe way back, if it was like there's maybe a lion lurking behind a tree that's going to eat me or something, they learned first to recognize what the thought was and then to release it by saying to themselves, this is a story that doesn't need to happen. This is a story that doesn't need to happen. They would hear the story in their mind, and then they would tell them that. And so that's a great technique for us to use as well. They also taught that if you have a story that's positive and good, it's something that you really want, comes to mind, that you would like to see happen, like I hope the report from the doctor comes back favorable, or I hope I get that promotion, or whatever. They would conclude it by saying, and this is a healing story. And this is a healing story. So think about that. Who we are and how we think about ourselves is based on a story that we come to believe, and we live in the story. We have many stories. And we do that oftentimes rather than turning to the spirit within that has higher truth available to us. You don't have to have the tooth pulled, in other words. So research in cognitive sciences have said that we basically think somewhere in the tens of thousands of thoughts per day. And that they have, in these studies, said that about 90% of these thoughts are being repeated. What you think about today, you thought about yesterday, 90%. So they are mental reruns, circling again and again and recycling within the framework of our brains and our thinking. So learn to make peace with any conflicts that you have that are dominating your mind. Look at what the stories that you have created that take you out of harmony and peace, that throw you off balance from joy and love. Recognize the inner enemies that you may have that hold you back, keep you stuck, that might be self-doubt, self-judgment. Learn to notice when they are only a whisper, and if they live for you day upon day, they become a scream. And we don't want the screams. Get it when it's a whisper. Make the change then. Be mindful Fear is a part of life. We all have fears, that's for sure. No one is able to get beyond fears. In fact, anyone that wants to have an extraordinary life and do extraordinary things will have to push past fears that stand in the way between them and their next higher good, whatever it might be, because it's unknown, you've never been there, you don't know what you're going to run into, you have to push through the fears. You might not do it perfect, you might not get it well, you might fail, all of the things that the mind may bring up around fear. And so you have to push past them. And people have done crazy things to learn how to make fear their friend. And, bungee jumping and firewalking and parachute jumping, goofy things like that I have done. No, I haven't done the bungee jump, I'm sorry, but I did do a firewalk. Tony Robbins, his group called and was offering that to me one day for free, so I went, foolishly. But I did a parachute jump, a tandem jump, and just to tell you about that, it was really intentional to make fear my friend. And so if you've ever done that, it was a board member who was on his 50th birthday doing his first jump, and it was on an airfield with a terminal that was open to where the party was going to be a birthday. And so others could sign up at certain times and have a jump, and you had to pay a certain amount. And so anyway, when you first get there, if you've ever done this, I had to go into a room where there was a video, and in the video there was a man who was an attorney sitting behind a desk trying to talk me out of doing what I was going to do. Really. And then they put all these papers in front of me, and I had to sign them. He had to tell me that, you have no recourse, insurance won't pay anything if something bad happens and all this, so you had to push past that. Then I get out of there, and I go out, and in the terminal, there's a guy on the ground sewing a parachute. I said, what's going on? He said, well, a recent skydive, it tore a bit. I said, oh, they tear. And so the time of my dive was delayed 30 minutes so they could sew up a parachute. So then I finally, get into the plane. It's a little plane, tiny plane, and I find out I'm not going to have a parachute. That basically I am strapped to a guy who has a parachute. And so my mind says, well, what if the strap breaks? I'm without a parachute. So that's where my mind took me. And then when you get up there, you just climb out this little door, and you're at 10,000 feet, and the wind is blowing, and there's a little step, and there's a handle on the wing. And so you step out, and you got a guy on your back. And, hi, how you doing? And ain't this fun? And so you're on this edge, and he has a foot on, and you really only have room for one foot. And then he's told you beforehand that when he says let go, those are big words. You have to have the faith to really let go and jump back, and it starts. And if you don't do that, he says, we're going right back in the plane. So the moment came, and that thought came through, I'm paying for this. Oh my gosh, but I did it. It was exhilarating. It was fun. And it was one of those experiences where I made, fear a friend. And, our human self, we have fear, we have doubt, we have resentments, anger, we have guilt, sometimes shame even. We can have revenge, we can have greed, we can have envy, ego tendencies. But we're not to ever condemn ourselves for the thoughts that we have, because we are not them. We have thoughts, but we are not our thoughts. We are a being that is to rise above them, become balanced in the spirit that we really are. We become spiritually balanced by remembering that the spirit of us is really about love and compassion and forgiveness, understanding, acceptance, kindness, all the things that are spiritual teachings. And when we get into those energies, we are able to maintain balance. And so spiritual masters have said there's essentially a covenant that we all signed on to, that if we live our lives in such a way that we balance our ego and self-importance with the inherent wisdom of our true self, our higher self, then we will not fear death, because we have tapped into the true realization that there is really nothing to fear, which Jesus taught, including death, because love has cast out every fear. And you've walked that line of being absolute, unconditional love. And so there is a writing about Einstein, Albert Einstein, and there was an article I came across that said, Einstein always questioned and went beyond what was seen by others as the observed fact. He went beyond it, deeper, into a place of wisdom where he knew there was another deeper truth, and the wisdom of spirit. And then I also read about the novel that was written by a lady, and one of the key characters was named Victor Frankenstein. And it was a horror story, a novel about a scientist who put together many parts of beings into a monster. And so it's interesting that, we can be in balance in such a way that we live our life like an Einstein, or we can be really out of balance and be a Frankenstein. And the matter of being in the world that has tribulation is about balancing oneself with the spiritual principles of transformation. And so I hold for all of you and for myself that we continue to be balanced with the fact that there's much going on in the world, and there's many things that can tip us into imbalance. It can get us overly and unhealthily focused in ways of seeing these things that are going on in the world and forget to hold an image of something that is higher and better, that we can move toward, whether it's our personal life, whether it's the community, the state we live in, the nation we live in, the world we live in, because all of it requires balance. And we have to be one of those who allow the seeds to hit pay dirt and allow the fruit of those seeds of truth to multiply 100-fold. May that be your life always. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.
Hi, thanks for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed our message. I'm here because I really personally wanted to be able to share with you a decision that I've made after much prayer, and that is that I announced with our spiritual community, Unity of Houston, that I would be leaving pulpit ministry. I made this announcement March 5th, so it wasn't long ago, and I will be leaving pulpit ministry here at this church as of September 10th. And so in the coming months between now and September, I will be sharing these lessons, Sunday lessons, with my successor, who is our senior associate, Reverend Michael Gott, who I know you're going to love and enjoy. He's a wonderful communicator, and I wanted to be able to have you experience him as we make this transition of leadership here at Unity of Houston, which I know will be just as strong and have just as powerful a message these Sundays, and hope that you'll want to continue to tune in and be with us. So I've really enjoyed these years on TV with you. I'm going on to what God has next for me. I'm not retiring. I have a lot in the tank. So I hope I have your blessings. You surely have mine. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope to be seeing you as we share the Sundays remaining between now and September 10th. Thank you.